Hey YouTube, CSM10495 here. Let's get right into it, shall we? Chapter 4, the American Political Culture. Let me start by just saying I do believe that a very important thing to take away from this is that, you know, culture makes a big, okay, I can't emphasize that enough, difference in political culture. Wow, I let me say that won't work nearly as well as it sounds to me. Uh, let's just say that culture makes a big difference in politics and government. Yeah. Okay, and we'll explore that a little bit more as we get into the chapter, shall we? Okay. So political culture. So there are definitely some differences between countries. So those are constitutional differences, and there's some obvious differences. I mean, some nations have kings, some have presidents. Who not going to get really into that, but in this, so the difference is, hey, there should be an S there. Okay, the difference is, you know, it leads to differing differing gee eh differences in power relationships. So who has the power, the people, because when people don't really have the power, I mean, do they, the political culture is definitely different. It can be a lot weaker because people don't feel like they have control over anything, or it could, in moments' notice, flip to the other side through like a revolution or something. Just something to think about. Anyway, so yeah, in addition to constitutional differences, there are often demographic differences. Differences. Yeah, I can spell. They're pretty straightforward usually. I mean, the differences in terms of language. They speak different languages. Even in this country, a lot of areas are becoming much more Spanish speaking than English speaking, and a lot of, excuse me, in some places they even have to print public signs in both languages just to make sure that the people can understand what they're saying. I mean, that really shows a big difference. But in addition, I mean, you can also see that there are race differences, ethnicity, religion. Religion, you can see that with Israel a lot. I mean, they have conflicting sides in that area, conflicting religions, and that leads to differences in ideology, and what they want to happen. I guess that goes to political culture. There are also some cultural differences. So, cultural differences. And, these lead to different ideas as to how we should define equality. Ideas to define equality. Yeah. And, that leads to, depending on the country, you can get different ideas as to what political equality, like voting and all of that, and what your vote means, and economic equality. I mean, should we just have an equal chance to make money, or should everyone have the same money, like in a more socialist or communist nation? Excuse me, I'm not feeling too good, I guess. So sometimes these differences, the differences between ideas can lead to quite ultimate differences in constitutional ideology, meaning different governments, different styles of how to rule people. So, you can explain for that using what we've written up here. I think I've pretty much given you a good amount here for this section. So let's move on to the next section, American political culture. So there are five, count them, five, and you could probably think of a few more if you really think about it. So there are five elements, five very important elements of the American political system. And you really don't think about it, but once I name them, you'll be like, oh yeah, we do value these. These are important. So let's see. Let's see if I can name them all here. We have liberty, freedom, democracy. Hey, we want our vote to actually mean something, Shouldn't have to worry about who counts them. Equality, everyone should have an equal chance to make it, I guess. And, everyone should be able to sit everywhere on the bus. All that type of thing. That's civil rights. We'll get to that some other day. Civic duty, so that's really, you should vote. The voting percentage isn't that high, but you do have the right to it, and you'd be unhappy if you didn't, even if you don't vote. And individual responsibility. Now this one, you could probably debate this, but the idea is that you have to work for yourself to help make you great. You know what I mean? You shouldn't just be, everyone who's born shouldn't just have a right to have everything. You really should have to work for it yourself, and America likes that. We like that you do usually have to work for things, and that leads to everyone working and doing their own fair share. So, I'm just gonna get out of the way a couple common questions here about this. If we all basically agree on these things, why do we have political conflict? We all agree, don't we? I believe most people agree that we do value these things I've listed up here. Well, we can. The whole point is, we can still conflict, or still argue. Having agreed on yeah having agreed on all these things, because if we really weren't going to argue, then we'd have millions of these things that we all agree on. You know what I mean? So there'd be millions of things to list, because then, hey, we'd all agree on all these things, but there's still things like, for instance, the economy. If we had a certain idea of the economy and everyone agreed on it, that would be on this list of things that we value in our political system, running the economy like that, but we don't. So instead, we're able to conflict and fight over that in Congress, and they're doing that right now. The presidential election, a big thing is, how are we going to handle the economy? So, just because I mentioned that, let's just talk a little bit about, where is it? The economic system. Economic system. The idea is that we do support free enterprise. We want, people to have their own shops. We want people to be able to spend their own money. So we do support free enterprise. And yet, let's put a ... we do want limits on marketplace freedom. We want, just put that there, limits on marketplace freedom. There are regulations in place like stock trading. That's the one that comes to mind, but I'm sure there are other ones I just can't think of off the top of my head. Americans also want, we want equality of opportunity. We want, equal opportunity. And since we all have the same chance, we want equal result. Now, this isn't always possible. I mean, everyone could have invested in Apple 10 years ago, and yet not I'm sure not everyone did, because if everyone did, we'd all have equal result. And that didn't happen. I mean, some people did get rich, and most people didn't because they didn't do the investment. Um, you know, so at this, with that in mind, Americans have a shared commitment in economic individualism. So we want economic individualism. We want people to, I guess this means self-reliant. We want people to be able to rely on themselves to do these things. We don't want the government to help. But the problem is, this idea is kind of changing. I mean, just look at economic stimulus and all, because I guess it comes down to when something or someone thinks that something's too big to fail, their view on this changes because they don't want millions of jobs lost, or they don't want a major change to how things are. Anyway, so with that in mind, let's move on to the next section here. Let's compare the United States to a couple other nations in terms of a political system. So I'll just put a little bit about let's use Sweden and Japan. That's two that the textbook talks about. So let's see. The Swedes. A lot of government decisions goes to experts, and specialists, people who really know the topic. And this leads to they rarely challenge government decision because the specialists had a say in it, and they know what they're talking about. They know a lot better than us, the people. So let's let them decide, and they'll know what's better. And in the end, you have the experts making the decisions, not really the people. This leads to value over liberty. So, liberty is sometimes lost in order to have a higher value in the end. I guess you can think of that in terms of economics. Anyway, so those are the Swedes. That's the Sweden. Gee. So let's talk a little bit about Japan. So Japanese. Well, the Japanese, they value good relations. So this really means that I don't know if you've ever seen it, but if you ever actually bump into a full, someone from Japan, like you're walking down the street and you bump into them, they'll actually turn around and bow to you and say something in Japanese. They really do, want good social relationships. It's a very respectful environment. And this leads to social harmony. I'm not sure if my example is very good, but it has happened to me once. That's the only reason I'm saying it. So they like having group decisions, people working together to solve a problem, as opposed to just experts. And this really gives us social harmony. Everyone's working together for something. And this value of good relationships really does lead to a respect for authority that we really don't see in this country as much as we probably did years ago, maybe with our first few presidents. But now, I mean, you can see shows like Jon Stewart, Colbert, just making fun of the government. I mean, they would never have anything like this in Japan. It just would not stand. So we've talked about them for a minute. Let's talk about America. So the Americans. We always feel like we had God-given rights, so we assert our rights. We emphasize a few things also, so, that just contrast with the other two nations listed here. We emphasize individualism, competition, equality, following rules. You know, we don't want a company to not follow a regulation just to get ahead. You know, that's we that would lead to outrage. Um, and we also want to treat others fairly. You know, we want things to be fair for everyone in the best way possible. So these differences here will lead to, or not lead to, but they do affect the political and economic systems that we have in place. Now let me just say here, we really, I mean, I don't want you to think that generalizing here. I mean, I kind of am, but this is just like a almost stereotypical idea here that the textbook's kind of going into, and it is warned that this is a little bit of a generalization, but it does it's a generalization for a reason, because it is the point, you know, it is what we really think, it is what they think. I mean, I guess it's what they think, it's according to the textbook, but I can say that the Americans, I am one, we think like this, we definitely do. So let's see, what else could I talk about in this chapter? Let's scroll down just a little, give me some more room. So let me just let me talk a tiny bit about religion in this section. Religion. All right. Americans value religion more so than Europeans do. You know, because this is shown by we wanted religious freedom. I mean, that's a big reason people came here and left countries like Britain. Religious freedom. Right. So, you know, this religious freedom, that happened hundreds of years ago now. But, you know, it's carried down over generations. I mean, we have a lot of donations to charity, you know, and that kind of stems from religion sometimes, you know, because some religions mandate charity and whatnot, and a lot of volunteer work. I mean, you know, a lot of these charities are run by volunteers, so, you know, people are doing things without pay, and, you know, it's kind of as a result of religious ideology. So yeah. Another thing we can kind of think about with religion, and this I could be going the complete wrong way with this, so we'll see. We have the word God in our Pledge of Allegiance. You know, does that mean that we want all to be able to observe their gods? Or, you know, I know even atheists and other people are getting unhappy about that, but this is a big thing, you know, because people wanted freedom, so they put the word God in to show that they've been given not really given, but they've been able to go to a place where they have religious freedom. So anyway, that could have gone the complete wrong way. I'm not sure if that made any sense, but I sure hope it did. Anyway, sources of political culture. Let's move on to this topic. So let's see, where's it originally from? Let's talk about the historical roots of it. So, historical roots. Okay. So political culture. You know, we had a revolution to get it, to get a political culture that we like more. You know, we didn't want to be ruled overseas. We wanted our own, you know, way that we can, our own methods of rule and, you know, setting and whatnot. So, you know, we were willing to have a revolution to do that. That's a big thing, you know, a lot of fighting, death, war. You know, you can even think about the political culture we made was almost, not really, I don't want to say that it was perfect, but something along those lines. I mean, you know, there wasn't even a second political party, you know, a legitimate one, until the 1800s. And I mean, I know you could say the anti-federalists, the federalists, wasn't really they really, there wasn't big opposition. I mean, there was, but it wasn't publicized as much. I know that they're Federalist Papers and all, but let me almost compare it to like today. We have ads and stuff on TV. They didn't have that type of thing, so like the opposition wasn't as widespread as it could have been. I'm not sure if I'm wording that correctly, but just think about that a little. I mean, there was a second party, but it just wasn't widespread enough. You know what I mean? Like, they couldn't spread the views everywhere in the way that we can do that today. It just wasn't possible. So anyway, and so the revolution was big, so let's talk about a little bit of what happened from that again. So there was widespread, and I don't mean like a lot of people, I mean widespread, let's say views, input into the Constitution. I mean, every state worked on it. Into Constitution. And this led to one that would be adhered to by all the states, at least for some time, until the Civil War, and, well, that's another day. And a big thing also, and this kind of stems from a really, really long arrow. This kind of led to religious freedom, because in some areas people wanted, one type of religion, some areas people wanted another. Well, then in the end they decided that there wouldn't be a national religion, and that led to real religious freedom, no like particular skewing in any direction. And, that's great. That's something we definitely value. Maybe that should even be on the values list I made earlier. Anywho. So the Puritans were here for some time. They left Europe, and they had a few values that they had, and we can see that they kind of echo down the ages to us. They valued hard work, working hard, saving money, saving up for things, so in case you needed to buy stuff, you had a bad harvest season, you need to buy food, you always need to have that money around. Obey secular law. We're saying secular here just to show that these can really be applied to almost anyone, except for one of them we'll get to later. Do good, if you see someone having trouble, help them. If someone's sick, try to find a way to make them feel better, all of those basic do-goods. And then this one is the only really non-secular one, which is embrace the Protestant ethic, follow the Protestant law. But the other four over here I think can really be applied to just about everyone, even today, or most people. So anyway, and I do think that the political system is kind of based around that also, because those are good ideas. I mean, hard work, saving money, secular law, and do good. I mean, it's the basis. It really is a good basis for everything. So anyway, let's see. A big thing, passing down the ages, families, through political socialization, I guess, talking about politics and talking about other stuff. Families instill the way we think. Ooh, getting a little close here. About the world. So chances are you're gonna think the same way as your parents. I mean, it's a high percentage, and even some studies show that if you go the other way, you're just going the other way just because your parents are the other way. So your parents really do, in many ways, instill the ideas that will be carried down. And some of those ideas are freedom of children. We want young people to be able to explore everything, learn a lot while they're young, enjoy their childhood, because when they're older, it's not nearly going to be as fun, I guess. um, Family equality. Um, Rights to each member. And if you ever hear of a family meeting, um, they'll consider each other's thoughts. It's not like one person in charge of everything. I mean, there was like a man of the house, but he would still consider what his wife, the children, other close family members were thinking, and that's really good. That it's still passed down today. Just about all this stuff, I believe. A big part of this chapter is just to show that political culture and culture in general is kind of passed down over the ages. Maybe somewhat diluted and whatnot, but the general ideas are definitely still a big part. Um, anyway, so let's continue on here. Let me scroll down. There kind of was a, I really don't want to, the textbook calls it a culture war. It's not really a war. I mean, there's no fighting, but, no real fighting. But, Orthodox, very religious people, they put their rules in God's hands almost. Whatever they believe God said, that's really what should be made into laws and made into rules. Meanwhile, more progressive people want, they want personal freedom. More so with, rules based on, reason. Where's my pointer? Okay. Based on reason and not religion. And I guess a good example of this today is abortion. That's a big thing, and a big argument is that they don't know when. They say they don't know when a baby, or a fetus is truly living, and if you can kill it. And a lot of that really stems from religion and the whole idea that the baby's alive, you can't kill it. God would not like that. So you can kind of think of it like that, somewhat. Anyway, so let's see, I need some more room. So let's have a very tiny little thing on this culture war. So culture war, we're going to compare it to political, let's say disputes. That sounds better than political war. So, so let's see. So culture differences in that money is not, an issue. Because your culture is usually passed down, regardless of if you have money or not. I mean, there are hundreds and thousands of cultures, and some are not, nearly as wealthy as the others, and yet they're able to pass down their ideology. Compromise is much tougher with culture, because people do not want to give up something that they've carried on for years and years and generations and generations. Meanwhile, political, it is still tough, but not as tough. I mean, because in the end, you can make compromise, in terms of things, because you don't have that same basis in the background. You don't have that same, oh, it's my culture, it's my spirit, we can't ruin that. It's politics. Politics is politics. And that kind of leads to a more profound conflict. It gets really animated by the deep differences in people's beliefs about, what's moral, rather, what's good, what's bad in private and public settings, what is acceptable, what is not. I'm just gonna, I don't want to take up space down here, but these are two different views. I've never seen these on the AP, they very well could have been, but you know, they're just kind of interesting. Um, these are two views on the culture war. We have a Fiorina view, which really says that war is a myth. You know, it's not really a war. It's more of a, well, anyway, political leaders are polarizing. You know, they're pushing things in different directions, but the public isn't really doing that. You know, so the war is more. Um, eh. So leaders polarize. I'm not really sure how to say this in English. It's kind of weird sounding. So the leaders really polarize, and then we have the Abramowitz, awesome name, Abramowitz. Ow, and this view is really, where'd my pen go? That war is, you know, a real thing. It's happening, and that it's getting bigger and bigger. The issues are more and more, relevant. You know, the differences are becoming bigger and bigger, and you know, at the same time, this is due to political engagement. You know, more by the I'm out of space. More by the people than the people and their leaders, as opposed to just really the leaders pushing these things into a war that isn't really a war. Yeah, I don't really think you need to know that, but it's, you know, just kind of two different viewpoints to halfway think about. Anyway, mistrust of government. You know, so what the polls say? Let's see. So the polls say that since 1950, there's a decline. There's a very steady... Did I spell steady wrong? I really did spell steady wrong. Steady decline in the trust of Washington. You know, we don't trust our leaders. That's a big problem. You know, we don't think that they're really doing what's good, what's good for us anymore. We think that they're doing more what's good for them. And that leads to, you know, different political culture than we've really had, that we had before that, you know, because before that we trusted our leaders. We thought that they would really do what's best for us, you know, or what they thought was best at least, as opposed to what, you know, was best for them. So let's just think about a little bit of a qualification to that, you know, a little bit in the other direction. Let's just say that trust levels rose, you know, just to say it's not always steady. They rose briefly during the Reagan, oh my god, Reagan administration. And, you know, let's just say that the distrust of officials, so we distrust the president, let's say, that's not really the same as having a distrust for the government. My own idea behind this is really that you know, if you distrust one official, you can still believe that the rest of the government, through like a checks and balances system, will work to you know, deflect their bad their bad thoughts and ideas that would have, you know, benefit them as opposed to everyone else. But you really do get a distrust of government when you feel as though multiple people you can't trust. You know, you can't trust multiple people with protecting your rights as opposed to their own benefit and whatnot. So anyway, let's see. What caused this? So what caused this decline in trust? Of trust. Oh man. Gotta work on my handwriting. And there probably should be a little question mark over here. Do, do, do. Okay. So let's see. Let's name a few. Vietnam, definitely. You know, for some time we really did not want people fighting in Vietnam, and yet they were still there. So we were thinking, oh man, the government just won't do what we're saying. You know, they're not listening to us anymore. So that led to distrust. Watergate. You know, with Nixon, and that led to his resignation. You know, we voted for this guy, and he did something really bad. How can we trust government if this guy did something bad, and that related to the whole party? And you know, it just made us think, oh wow, there's there are definitely troubles here. You know, we can't trust these guys. What about Clinton's sex scandals? You know, I did not have sexual relations with that woman, and that led to impeachment. You know, how can we trust this guy? He didn't, he did something so bad. And even more recently, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. I definitely spelled that wrong. I'm sorry if I did. These wars, we wanted, it seems as though we wanted out. And yet the government just kept us there. And now, we're finally, I think we're mostly out, but now we just have some enforcers or something like that. But yeah, we wanted people out for years, and we just couldn't get it. And maybe the decline could also be caused by high levels of trust. In the post-World War II era. We trusted the government a lot. I mean, we had they didn't tell us of the atomic bomb, and that was probably for the better, but they used it. We were able to win the war. We thought, wow, the government we were able to work, we worked so hard, the government worked so hard to send people in there. We won the war. Hitler's done, Japan's done, we won. It made us have incredibly high levels of self-esteem, I guess. But, so that made our levels really high. I mean, it was only a matter of time before they came back down, right? Well, that's a little bit of an open-ended question. There's no real answer. Anyway. So anyway, in addition to that, we have high expectations. The government's expanding more and more and more, so we want them to do more and more and more stuff. And when they cut a program or something, that leads to us losing trust because we're like, hey, we just had that. Wait. I expected better of you, so I don't trust you anymore to keep bettering me if you're taking away something like this. And also, overall, there's a decrease in patriotism. And, of course, this was offset a little bit by the 9/11 attacks. Everyone was patriotic. Even in other countries, people were patriotic towards the United States. But, overall, it seems that people are less and less patriotic, leading to, of course, less and less trust, and confidence in the government. So, anyway, so let's talk about some other factors that may generally affect the trust in government. A big thing is political efficacy. Let me just define this. Efficacy is like the idea that my vote matters. That's definitely spelled wrong too. But my vote matters. I'm gonna go to this election and vote because when I vote, I'm making a difference in what, and who's gonna be elected. Well, this is on the decline overall. But, because people are thinking, well, my vote doesn't mean anything, it doesn't matter. And I guess you can kind of relate this to the Electoral College. Oh my, god damn it. Electoral College. So anyway, because if you really understand the Electoral College, your vote technically doesn't, technically really doesn't mean much, because theoretically, and this has not happened, theoretically the delegates or electorates, I guess, could vote in the other direction as the people. But besides that, we think, oh, it's not a popular vote system. I live in New York, and I know a lot of people who aren't going to vote this year because they think no matter what they do, the Democrats are going to win. It may happen, it may not. But yeah. So anyway, let's just a little bit to think about. But and yet still our efficacy is higher than most European nations. So ours is on the decline, but it's still higher than a lot of other countries. I mean, we still do have some type of idea that what we think matters, but it's definitely on the decline. Anyway, so yeah, I really think that's all we need for this chapter. I'm just looking at a little bit of the chapter here just to make sure. Yeah, we're good. All right, so let's talk about. We're almost done here. Nice. So let's talk a little bit about political tolerance. Let me just put an arrow over here to show that this is what we're talking about now. So political tolerance, it's crucial. Oh my God, I cannot spell today. Crucial to democracy. So therefore, citizens must be tolerant. But not perfectly tolerant. I'll explain this in a moment. Okay, so we must be able to tolerate, other people's ideology and thoughts and views, and at the same time, if we were perfectly tolerant, we'd never fight with them. We'd never argue for a better, for what we think is better. So that's a good thing for us, it seems, because it almost leads to gridlock and whatnot in politics, and through that we really do get a good mishmash of ideology and laws and stuff, and that leads to a bettering of government, at least in my own opinion. Anyway, so let's see. Let's just talk a little bit about American tolerance in general. On the outside, we tolerate. We like to say, oh, we'll tolerate anything, any religion, any this, any that. In America, we're great. But when it really comes down to it, let me actually just say, tolerate, ... But if you are, then, this a really good example of this is like, the right for two of the same gender to marry, gay marriage. On the outside, America tolerates anything, and yet, if you really strike someone in the wrong way, they will go completely against it. They'll go completely against something that, would just seem like an American tolerant, a thing that America would tolerate. So if you strike the wrong chord, you really will get opposition on almost anything, That's something to think about. A good example definitely is gay marriage. So in the end, there's a very thin line between intolerance and civic concern. So there's a very, in other words, there's a very small difference between what we would definitely be full out against and fight out, and something we'd just be concerned with but still let happen. So there's a very small line there. I mean, there's some people who are against gay marriage, but they're okay with it. If it happens, it happens. Okay, fine. And then there's some people who will full out, petition it, fight it. They'll get angry. They'll have, you know, a group of people who are angry at it, and they'll fight it, and they'll bring it to the government, and they'll try to get things repealed. And so yeah, there's a big difference, and yet there's a very thin line between the two different, what people will do. So in the end, I guess the point of this section is the things that we tolerate last longer. And actually, let me I'm gonna actually instead word this the way the textbook does, just so I make sure I'm saying this correctly. Things that are less tolerated survive because few are willing to act on their beliefs. They don't want to restrict others. They don't want to restrict liberties of others. Ay. So, in the end, on a lot of controversial topics, we don't have a widespread agreement. Oh my spelling is awful today. We don't have a widespread agreement on what should be restricted. What should be tolerated, what should not. I guess a good thing is that in the end this gets to courts, the Supreme Court, other courts. So it gets to the courts, and luckily they're pretty insulated. They're supposed to be at least insulated from public opinion. At least, it's another chapter, but anyway, from now all you really need to know is that they're insulated from public opinion, which allows them to make best decisions. Because they can really weigh the facts on both sides as opposed to just weighing, one side's completely out of proportion facts or, yeah. So anyway, let's just have some quick conclusions here to wrap this up. Political liberty can't be taken for granted. And that, in the end, no group is completely tolerant of everything. And so something, I guess a little bit of a closing thought. It's really that originally years and years ago, conservative people targeted professors for having crazy ideas and for thinking of these crazy things that don't make any sense to us. And well, how could you think like that? Why do you think that that's true? And how could you prove that? And all. So they criticize that. And yet today, over time, it seems as though professors criticize conservatives. They're saying, now the professors are saying, how could you be doing this? This doesn't make any sense. It's not sustainable. This is crazy. And now professors, both times professors are more liberal, I guess. It's just a matter of who's criticizing who for their beliefs. So over time, it's kind of flipped. It's just a little bit something to think about. Anyway, I think that's really all you need. CSM 10495, Chapter 4, The American Political Culture. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.